Hey, today we're going to talk about 1.5, the nitrogen cycle. So take a moment and review the Enduring Understanding, check out the learning objective. You can pause the video as you review the essential knowledge and set up your Cornell notes. So the nitrogen cycle. Let me just start by saying this process, there's a lot of steps and you just have to have it memorized. So take really awesome notes during this unit or this lesson, and please make it legible so you can repeat this at a later date. All right? The atmosphere contains 80% nitrogen. Actually, it's really 78%, but really, if you remember, it's around 80%. That will be good. And this, I just breathed in 80% nitrogen. I just breathed out 80% nitrogen. My body doesn't use that nitrogen. The atmospheric nitrogen is basically non-reactive. It doesn't react in our bodies. It really has no impact on us. But we need this nitrogen because nitrogen is present in DNA. It's also present in proteins. So every organism needs nitrogen. We just can't get it from the atmosphere. So the nitrogen cycle is important to all life on Earth. The first thing that happens is we have biological fixation, and that is through the actions of particular bacteria. And one bacteria in particular, you might see Rhizobium. I don't think you're going to have it memorized, but you might see it referenced, so it doesn't hurt to recognize it. But Rhizobium bacteria are found in little nodules, and these are little tiny, you'll see little looking like almost like little balls on the roots of different plants. We have legumes, which are like beans and peas. They are nitrogen fixers. Alfalfa, clover, other plants, peanuts also can fix it. Peanuts are also legumes. So anything that is a legume or alfalfa or clover, there's other plants as well, but they will fix nitrogen. In my plants, I had, in my yard, I have a lot of plants I put outside in the summer, and I planted a lot of beans in there because I wanted to naturally replenish the nitrogen. So some of my plants that I have growing, I might have little tropical trees outside now, have little beans growing inside them for the summer. This will permit the nitrogen to go from a gaseous or N2, and it will be converted to NH4 or ammonium. Now, there's specific chemical reactions that I have neglected to put in here, and if you just remember, it goes from N2 to ammonia or ammonium. Either way, they're both involved. Sometimes you'll see it NH4, sometimes you'll see it NH3. NH4 plus is ammonium. Okay? Now, the next step is nitrification, and that's where we go from ammonium, NH4 plus, and it will convert to NO3. It really goes from ammonium to nitrite and then nitrate. But you don't have to remember the nitrite. You might have to see it. But what I really want you to remember is nitrate. NO3 with the little minus, nitrate. And this task is completed by nitrifying bacteria, which are used by decomposers. So decomposers, including nitrifying bacteria, are converting this NH4 to NO3. Now this is very water soluble, and so is the NH4. They're soluble in water because they are ions, and they are easily dissolved in water, so they can be easily assimilated. So this process is assimilation. And that's where these organisms are taking the NO3 or the NH4, and these plants are taking these and making proteins. So when you're assimilating something, they're taking it and making it part of their tissues. So again, assimilation is done by plants taking in soluble ammonium and nitrates. And it's making this NH2, which is really a protein. NH2 is an amino acid or an amine group. But really, if you remember protein, that would be sufficient. Then what happens is these organisms are going to die And when they die, they will be broken down into ammonium again. And this is through the process called ammonification, and that is done by bacteria and different fungi. And finally, when you have nitrates being converted back to gaseous nitrogen, you have a process called denitrification. So nitrification made it nitrate, denitrification made it not nitrate. And that is done by denitrifying bacteria, and it is an anaerobic process, which means there is no oxygen. Now, there is other gases released at different stages during this process, but these are the main ones that I have seen in all of the questions that I've ever encountered, either multiple choice or free response. The only other thing is there is abiotic fixation that can convert atmospheric nitrogen directly into nitrates, and that is through lightning strikes. Anything with high energy like lightning can shock that nitrogen in the atmosphere, mix it with the oxygen, and basically forms nitrate wherever you have lightning strikes. Okay? Now, there's a lot of stuff here, and it's like, how the heck am I going to remember this? Well, I have a mnemonic. Okay? So it's this fixed nod, anpan, 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 I don't know. I saw this in a textbook. I really like it, but you know what? If you don't remember how to say it, who cares? Remember how to spell it. Now, how this works is you have your process on the top and the product is on the bottom. So the first one, fix and the A, just remember how it's written. Fix nod, anpan, anpan, I don't know. Anyway, the fixation makes ammonium. This is the first step. So fixation produces ammonium. The next step is nitrification produces nitrates. The third step, assimilation, and that was happening with each one of these. Assimilation produces the proteins. And then finally, ammonification produces ammonium. And finally, denitrification produces nitrogen. And it's called nitrogen when it's in the gaseous form, or N2. Now, you'll notice I have this little symbol and this little thing that I've had, throughout here. And I created this because if you draw this out, it matches this little diagram here. Now, at the gray part here is underground and the white part here is above ground. And you'll notice there's only literally two parts that are either at or above the surface of the Earth. We have the proteins are found at the surface and the nitrogen is found above the Earth's surface. Everything else in the nitrogen cycle takes place underground. So if you can remember this mnemonic and you can remember this diagram, you will be able to reconstruct the nitrogen cycle. Now, ammonia versus nitrates. So most of the particles within the soil are going to be negative. So the ammonium is held in the soil. This NH4, because again, the soil particles are negative, the NH4 is held and bonded to those soil particles. However, the NO3 is going to run off. In other words, it's going to be attached to the water and it's going to run off to the nearest body of water. And this can lead to a process called eutrophication. So eutrophication is a much more complex process that we will be discussing throughout this entire year. Basically, here's what it is. So nitrates are limiting nutrients, and one of the things that happens is the nitrates, when they wash off into a body of water, since it's a limiting nutrient, the presence of nitrates will cause a lot of plant growth. And this plant growth will use up all the nitrates, and eventually those plants will die. And when those plants die, the actions of the bacteria and the decomposers are going to use up all of the oxygen in the water, which leads to a condition called hypoxia, with a reduced amount of oxygen. And because there's a reduced amount of oxygen, fish die and other aquatic organisms die. That's a problem. So eutrophication is something we will be discussing throughout this entire year. Okay? Now, one way that humans can impact the nitrogen cycle is we add synthetic fertilizers. Because nitrates and nitrogen is a limiting nutrient, we can readily make synthetic fertilizers out of containing NO3. Sometimes they also contain ammonium as well, whether they're ammonium or NO3. NO3 is the bad one because it can run off into a nearby body of water. The more NO3 that we have, the more eutrophication we have. And remember, eutrophication is the nitrate enters a body of water, causes the plants an algal bloom. Algal bloom, algae are blooming, huge exponential growth of algae. When those algae die, because they've used up all the nitrates, when they die eventually, the decomposition of them will consume or will reduce the amount of oxygen in the water, leading to fish kills and biodiversity loss. Okay? Another thing that happens when we add this nitrate, the more nitrate we add, through the process of denitrification, one of the things that does happen is N2O is released in this process. And the N2O is a greenhouse gas. And this is a step, one of the steps in denitrification. This greenhouse gas can contribute to global warming and global climate change. So this is the way that humans impact the nitrogen cycle. What I would like you to do is, for our FRQ practice, is identify a transformation that occurs in the nitrogen cycle and describe an impact that results from that transformation. Take this opportunity to respond to this. I thank you very much for your patience. I thank you for your attention, and I will see you soon.